Hey everyone, and welcome back to Civics Review. Today we're going to be talking about the concept of limited government, having some kind of a rule system for what our government can and can't do, and also examining checks and balances and separation of powers. Well, let's get to it. Now, the standard we're going to be learning about today is about describing how the Constitution limits the power of the government through things like separation of powers and checks and balances. We only have a few objectives in this video, and that's to define what these terms actually mean, and then when we're given an example, can we identify whether it's separation of powers or checks and balances? The idea of limited government is pretty self-explanatory. It's government that is limited, meaning it can't do anything and everything at once. Here, you need that again? Limited government is government that is limited. I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is not rocket science, it's civics. Now, our government has rules it has to follow, and we find these rules in the Constitution. Now, rules of any kind are limiting. I mean, think about it. At home, we have to follow a certain set of rules, right? No Xbox before homework is done, same for the TV, no phone at the dinner table, clear the table after dinner, and then lights out at a certain time. In no way, shape, or form do these rules give you more power. They limit your power. And that's what the rules do for our government. They limit what it can and cannot do. And the framers of the Constitution love this concept. A limited government is one that can abuse its power, hurt its citizens, or deny them their rights. Remember, one of the main factors of revolution against the British was the fact that the UK government levied heavy taxes against the colonists without their consent. It also denied them their rights by taking away things like free parking and the beauty contest. The UK government also hurt their own citizens, killing them in the streets of Boston in what we now know as the Boston Massacre. Now, with very few limitations to their government, the UK was able to do all of these things to the colonists. When the Founding Fathers got a chance to make their own government, they decided rules are good. Thank you, US Constitution, for all you do. So how does the rules set forth in the Constitution limit the power of the government? Well, separation of powers. That's what we call it. It's dividing the powers of government into three branches. To visualize this, we can make a list of what the government can actually do. Not everything, but, a few things. So, they can print money. They can interpret laws, command the military, establish foreign policies, regulate trade, enforce the laws, create lower courts, appoint diplomats, and punish pirates. Wait, what? Yeah, no, that's real. That's legitimately in the Constitution of the United States. They had the power to punish pirates. But giving all this power to one person or one branch would be a bad thing. So we separate the powers into three branches. Now each branch is limited in what they can do. By simply dividing the powers of the government, we create separation of powers. Some of these powers belong only to the legislative branch, some in the middle belong to the executive branch, and the one on the side here is for the judicial branch. These powers are only for these branches. No other branch can do these things. And in that way, we have separation of powers. If you're familiar with The Legend of Zelda, the Triforce reminds me of the separation of powers. No one person can hold all of the power in their hand. It would be dangerous. And so to ensure the safety of Hyrule, they divide the power into three people. Now, checks and balances is similar, but different. Let me emphasize that again. Separation of powers and checks and balances are similar, but different. Meaning they're not the same. Otherwise, they'd have the same name. We can define checks and balances as a system that empowers each branch... It just disappeared. A system that empowers each branch of government to stop the other. The concept of checks and balances was important when the Federalists were designing and writing the Constitution. Remember those anti-Federalists who worried that all these new powers of the government would allow it to abuse the rights of the people? Well, the system of checks and balances was designed to prevent the government from doing just that. Now, let's say the president was going off the deep end, doing something he shouldn't be doing. Who could stop him? And if you're confused by president and which branch I'm talking about, we'll take a quick time out and go over some of the other names we use for the branches. Okay, this is a pretty good visual of checks and balances. We want to think of this as the three branches kind of playing tug of war with one another. Should one branch go rogue and decide to do something completely off the wall, the other two branches are there to kind of hold it in place and make sure that it follows all of the rules. Alright, let's see this in action. So take the legislative branch. Their job is to make laws, and they go through this horrific process of making a law, and they send it to the president. Now, the president really has two choices here: to sign the bill and make it a law, or to veto it. Now, if he vetoes a bill, that's checking the power of the legislative branch. The Founding Fathers wanted each branch to have this kind of power to stop the other branch from doing something potentially terrible. Now, Congress can also check the power of the president. They're not completely powerless in this situation. They can do something that's called an override. I mean, what if the president vetoed a bill, a perfectly fine bill, just because he didn't like the Speaker of the House's face? Shouldn't Congress have the right to say, look, President, we think that you're a little bit crazy here. We worked very hard on this bill, and we think it's going to help a lot of people. You're out of line. We're overriding you. This bill is going to become a law. This is how checks and balances was intended to work. One branch stopping the other from going too far. Now, there's many other powers in the Constitution that allows each branch to check the power of the other. So let's look at a few other examples. Take the legislative branch again. If they feel the president is going off the deep end or doing something that he shouldn't be doing, then they have the power to impeach. That means to expel and investigate what they did wrong and remove them from office. But they can do this with the Supreme Court as well, the judicial branch. They can say, hey, wait a minute, you guys aren't doing the right thing, so yoink, they're going to pull them out of their office or pull them out of their Supreme Court and get someone back in there that can do the job the right way and serve the American people. All right, you've probably been looking over that corner there, that corner, and going, I don't really see any interaction with these guys. What's going on with the judicial branch? Let me remind you, these are the judges, right? They interpret the law, how something should be pronounced, or what they meant by the law. They're also there to call each other branch out and say, you're crazy. You're not following the Constitution. It's called judicial review. Now, the executive branch and the legislative branch, it seems like they interact a lot more, and that's true because they kind of work together to make laws, and the president asks Congress to fund certain things. That's part of their powers, and the judicial branch is kind of just chilling there, watching both of them, making sure they're following the rules and the laws of the Constitution. That's their job. And should they do something that's out of line, they're going to swing that band hammer and call them nuts and make them stop doing whatever they're doing. So how are these different again? How can I tell what's what? The big thing on your test is going to be trying to figure out, are they talking about separation of powers, or is this example trying to talk about checks and balances? So remember, separation of powers is simply dividing power to three different branches. It's found in our rulebook in the Constitution. You can do this, and those guys can do that. Checks and balances, on the other hand, is when two branches or multiple branches try to prevent the other from doing something. It's kind of like a tug of war. Now, we're going to enlist the help of a few chickens to figure out what's different about this. I find, in general, when you enlist the help of chickens, things become more clear. Now, if you're reading a question that says, well, this branch can do that and this branch can do this, if they're just doing something that's their power, whether that's chasing flies, launching nuclear bombs, or whatever that other guy is doing, that's just separation of powers. The big difference is interaction. That's what we're looking for on a test question. Ask yourself, are two branches interacting with one another? Are they bothering each other, poking one another in the eyes? Is deadly kung fu being used to stop another branch from doing something? Then that, my friend, is checks and balances. It's time for mortal combat between our brains and these test questions. So this one's asking, the system of checks and balances is best illustrated by the power of what? And let me remind you that checks and balances looks a little bit like this. Two branches interacting with one another, trying to prevent the other from doing something. Option A says Congress to impeach one of its members. All right, that to me is no interaction. That's one branch doing one thing. It's a sad panda. Option B, the president to veto a bill passed by Congress. All right, now we're talking. I got two branches here. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's checks and balances, but I can see they're interacting with one another. The president says no, Congress cries in a pillow. To be thorough, we should probably go through the rest of these. You never know. So C, a governor to send the National Guard to stop a riot. Sounds like one branch doing its thing, commanding the military. And option D, state and federal governments to pass and collect taxes. Doesn't really seem like this is a lot of branches trying to stop one another. I believe this is the part in Mortal Kombat where the guy says, finish him, and we uppercut this question all the way into a pit of despair. Okay guys, that's it for now. Thanks so much for sticking to the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. We'll make more videos soon.